Millionaire sent his spoiled daughter to live in the country, but when he went to visit her, he almost fainted because of what he saw. David had just returned from his office. It was evening. He picked up a bottle of juice kept in the freezer, poured it into a glass, and started drinking it. Summer had started. Now the days were getting longer and the nights were getting shorter. After that, he went to Leah's room. Leah's room was empty. He had brought his favorite chocolate for Leah. He had realized that his daughter Leah was now depressed. He went to the second floor, calling out to Leah. "Leah, Leah." He was calling Leah while climbing the stairs. On reaching the second floor, he saw that the door of the room was closed. He entered with a beating heart. She was standing near the window. She was looking at the splendor of the city with sadness. "How are you, my doll, and what are you doing here?" he asked Leah, lost in thought. "I'm fine, Dad. Just missing my mom so much," Leah replied sadly. "Come, my dear daughter, I was waiting for you." Then they came to the first floor. He raised Leah with great care. His full name was David Miller, while his daughter's name was Leah Miller. Leah was 15 years old. When she was 7 years old, her mother Sarah died. David had a love marriage with Sarah. After Sarah's death, he could not marry again. He wanted to keep Sarah's love in his heart forever. He himself was worried after separating from Sarah, but he never let Leah feel it. He was the owner of a cosmetics factory. He had considerable wealth but was still in the early stages of business. After Sarah's death, he gave all his attention to Leah. He had provided Leah with every comfort. Wherever he went, Leah was with him. It was true that David was broken after his separation from Sarah, but Leah was his refuge. He dedicated all his wealth to Leah. He wanted Leah not to miss anything, but in reality, he himself missed Sarah a lot. Sarah belonged to a village, and after marriage, he shifted to the city, taking Sarah with him from the village. On reaching the first floor, he gave chocolates to Leah and gave her the good news of having dinner at a 5-star hotel tonight. A wave of happiness appeared on Leah's face. It was a huge success for David. After dinner, he went to Leah's room. He had to discuss an important topic. "Leah, I'm moving my business to another state. It will benefit our company a lot, so I'll have to stay there for some time," David began to speak. He took one look at Leah's face and then continued. "You are still young. I want you to spend this time in your mother's village. You know her brother lives there, and they all will be very happy to meet you. I have deposited so much money in your bank account that for the next 50 years you can live in luxury," he said convincingly to Leah. "All right, Dad, if you like it, I'm ready for it," Leah agreed. "I also think that you should spend your childhood in a peaceful environment. When you will become mature, then you should shift here with me. And the important thing is that your mother is also from the same village," David further explained. Now Leah had agreed. David had to leave Leah in the villages the next week. It was early morning when they both got in the car. David had to go with his daughter, but he remembered the one time he went with Sarah. It was morning time, but the heat was rising. He turned on the AC of his car, and the music was playing softly with it. After a long time, Leah was traveling towards this village, which was full of beautiful landscapes. "Leah, I just want to spend a few years on the business, and then everything will be perfect. It's just a matter of a few years, and then I'll come back and take you too," he said while driving. "Okay, Dad, they are very nice people, especially my mother's brother. I'm also tired of the hustle and bustle of the city." Leah's eyes were on the road. After about 2 hours of driving, they reached the village. The fresh air and atmosphere of the village were extremely wonderful. Sarah's brother was very happy to see Leah and David in front of him. He welcomed them. When they found out that Leah will be with them for a long time, then all of them were happy. David left the next day. He had to reach another state. His business had expanded, but he was a hardworking person. After his separation from Sarah, he focused all his attention on his business and Leah. The few years that David spent in another city for business proved to be very difficult for him, but he often spoke to Leah on the phone. He had no idea how Leah had made up for Sarah's lack. He often missed Sarah. It had been 8 years since he was separated from Sarah, but there was not a single day in these 8 years when he did not miss Sarah. After almost 5 years, he returned to his home. He was very excited to see Leah now after 5 years. He thought that he would spend the night alone at home and the next morning he would go to the villages to pick up Leah. He made a decision, but this night was sad for him. He was alone, but Sarah's countless memories were with him. Even if he wanted to, he could not forget Sarah. As the night got deeper, he started missing Sarah more and more. He started feeling suffocated, so he went to the second floor. He opened the window and looked out at the city. Traffic on the road was flowing as usual. The splendor of the city was at its peak, but the loss of Sarah was irreparable. He took sleeping pills and fell asleep. The next day he woke up at noon. After bathing, he got ready. He missed Sarah and Leah a lot. He drove the car forward, and now his direction was towards Sarah's villages. When he entered the village, everything was associated with memories of Sarah. There were tears in his eyes. Suddenly he remembered that there was a park in front of Sarah's house. When they both used to come to this village, they often used to enjoy in the same park. He turned his car towards this park. He didn't inform Leah that he was coming to pick her up. David wanted to surprise her. After Sarah, there was no peace left in his life. He remembered her smile. Everything became a memory. After that, there was nothing interesting left. He lived his life in a very tragic way. Everybody said to him, "David, you have changed," but he kept quiet. Although David had a lot of money, but in real life, he felt very lonely. He got dark circles around his eyes. He never got any relief after that. He went to the park where he and Sarah used to sit most of the time. He was shocked to see that Sarah was sitting there. She was looking like 20 years as when she was young. For a moment, he felt as if he was having a dream. 21 years ago today, he had met first time to Sarah in the same park. She was sitting on the same bench. Today, 21 years later, Sarah looked exactly 20 years old. His heart beat loudly. He came running towards her. "Sarah?" David asked with a beating heart. She was lost in thoughts. She suddenly looked at David with a surprised expression on her face. When he came closer to her, she was not Sarah, but she was exactly like Sarah. If she had been Sarah, then she would have been 41 years old, but she looked 20 years old. "Oh, Dad, you forget me. I am Leah, David." She replied. Her style was like Sarah, and her voice was also like Sarah's. She hugged David. David had tears in his eyes. When he married Sarah, Sarah was 20 years old. Now he was seeing Leah after 5 years. She was just like Sarah. She came home with David. It was the same house where Sarah and David had spent the most beautiful days of their lives. As soon as he entered, he was surrounded by memories of Sarah. Even his tears were not stopping. It was a tragic story. Leah was hugging him and crying. David was very sad for Sarah. It looked like David was going to faint. But for the last 20 years, he had found peace today. It was in the form of Leah, David. She was a sign of Sarah and his peace. "Your mother was just like you, Leah. Her eyes and especially her smile. I thought Sarah was sitting in the park," David said with a shudder. There were tears in his eyes. Leah wiped David's tears with her tissue. Meanwhile, David took out a picture from his wallet with shaking hands and gave it to Leah. Leah carefully looked at this 19-year-old picture. In it, David stood with Sarah. Sarah was carrying 1-year-old Leah. She was smiling. She was a copy of Leah. "I am alive with this picture." David's tears were still not stopping. For the first time in her life, Leah was seeing David so sad. Leah hugged the picture of her parents and David. "I'm glad I got Sarah's copy." David smiled as he hugged Leah. Life is so strange, he thought. This is the end of this story. Share your thoughts in comments below. See you soon.